Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, residents of the Amona settlement outpost prepare for their eviction. Israelis come together in solidarity with the Syrian people, and a ban on short skirts in the Israeli parliament sets off a major scandal. I'm Natasha Kirchek here with the latest news in Israel. Thousands of Israelis across the country are demonstrating in support of the residents of the Amona settlement outpost who are set to be evacuated from the West Bank community this week. And it looks like the pressure is getting to the Israeli government, which has now presented the residents with a revised agreement that would allow for twice as many families to stay on the hilltop outpost. According to the agreement, 24 families would receive trailer homes on a plot just meters from the outpost. Last week, only 12 families were given this option. The remaining families are set to be given temporary residence in the nearby settlement of Ofra.
All the houses you see in Amona, it's only house, it's the Israelis' houses, and we are going to stay. And the government said we need to go and we need to leave. And all the families and all the people you can see now, and this morning, it's the last few hours before coming all the government to take all the people out from the houses. We are going to stay forever in Amona.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is spearheading the last-ditch deal. The Amona families have reportedly now accepted the deal, but they're threatening to renew their struggle if the government fails to meet its commitment to build new homes and public buildings. It's been a dramatic day at the outpost. Earlier this morning, angry protesters forced Housing Minister Yoav Gallant to leave, while chanting the land of Israel is not for sale. After being chased inside an administration building, the cabinet minister tried to salvage his visit by giving a short statement, emphasizing the need to comply with Israeli laws. And just a short time ago, dozens of activists blocked nearby roads until they were forcibly dispersed by security services. One miner was arrested for attacking a border police officer. Meanwhile, it's being reported that a number of soldiers tried to abandon their posts after stating their refusal to participate in the residents' impending eviction. The troops only returned to base after being promised they'd only receive indirect assignments to secure nearby highways when the operation gets underway. The residents of the Amona outpost are being offered a new agreement from the government this week, and here to discuss the issue in the studio are Ari Ful, the Assistant Director of Standing Together, and Yariv Oppenheimer, the former Director of Peace Now. Thanks so much for coming in, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So this new government deal to move twice the amount of families, Amona families, to a plot of land nearby instead of to a nearby settlement, Ofra, has just been accepted by the Amona settlers. How will this affect the overall evacuation and the transition? Are we going to see less of a conflict?
It's still too early to say because we need to see if the Supreme Court is going to approve it as well. It's not so easy. There are people that demand the land around this outpost, and it's in a process. But if it's going to be approved, for sure we will see less intensive evacuation because the people of Amona are going to accept it quietly. Maybe some other youths that are coming from outside of the outpost are going to make some demonstrations and make it a bit more energetic, but the people of Amona, and this is the main issue that can shake the government, they are going to obligate to evacuate quietly, and therefore it's going to be less dramatic than it was look like a few hours ago.
Natasha, the truth of the matter is this: the agreement is a little bit of a farce because people are being kicked out of their homes, and no Arabs are moving in. In other words, the appeal that Yariv Oppenheimer and his organization Peace Now brought to the courts was not about bringing Arabs back into their fields. No one's coming back in. In fact, till date, there's not a single Arab who can actually bring proof of ownership. So yes, the deal is happening, and unfortunately, what Yariv just said is really libelous. I mean, when have these people, the residents of Amona, ever spoken violently? Years ago, when they boosted the people out of Amona and destroyed 9 homes which were legally built, it was the police that were violent. This constant bashing of the people in Judea and Samaria is just wrong. We hear it from the worst enemies of Israel. I don't understand why someone would say...
Let's be honest.
One second, excuse me. I don't understand why someone would say it'll be less violent. When were the people in Amona ever violent?
I didn't say violent. I said it will be less passionate, less energetic. And if you want to see the movie clip from the last evacuation, you will see that the settlers were violent as well, and they threw stones. And if they were Palestinian, you will say that they tried to
with
kill
all due respect,
and to hit and to wounded Israeli soldiers.
Incorrect. The police were put on charges. The head of police said, "I know those religious people.
I can
let
show
them
you
burn."
the video.
Yariv, the head of police last time said, "Let those religious people burn." Do you condemn that statement?
Yes, of course.
So it wasn't the people. It was not the people.
But let's speak about what you said about the Arab people that are not going to allow to their places. This is the result of the government initiative. Let me finish. If the government will allow them to get back to their land, they are going to get back to the land. Here we are talking about a principle, and the principle is a Jewish one, saying not steal. You are not allowed to steal land that belong to other people.
No,
this
Natasha,
is the story of Amona.
I have to point this out.
I
have to point something out for 1 second. What you just said is very nice, but it's factually incorrect. There are no Arabs with any proof.
I can show you the names.
So show me the no, not the names. No, Yaron.
These are the people that went to the Supreme Court.
Listen to me. I don't want the names.
So
I want proof of ownership. When you come and sue me, the first thing you have to show is proof of ownership. To date, there is no proof of ownership. True or not true?
No, not true. Because you know that today, if you want to see who is the owner of the land, you need to go to the civil administration. And the civil administration, from day one, say to the Supreme Court, this is a private Palestinian land.
Okay,
and
again,
therefore you cannot legalize
this land. Let's move on to the next question.
I asked you if there's an Arab with proof of ownership.
Let's talk about the overall issue here, okay? What does this mean, you know, if the Amona settlers are in fact evacuated as we think is going to happen on December 25th? What does this mean for the rest of the West Bank and the Israelis living in Judea and Samaria in these settlements?
So this is actually a great question, because the truth of the matter is, even if they would move to Ofra, Yariv wants to see those people kicked out as well. In other words, this is a solution that we're all talking about, but Yariv and the organization Peace Now doesn't want Ofra existing. They don't want anyone existing in Judea and Samaria. So the solution is like
Don't talk in my behalf, please.
Okay, fine.
In any case,
clarify. What is Peace Now?
Let me just, Ofra, for example, is all built on the same claims that they're making about Amona. So unless he is not being straight with his own views, they want the people in Ofra, and well, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, that's where the question comes in here. Why? Why is Peace Now pushing for this? You know, we see the Israeli Prime Minister who claims that settlements are not the real, obstacle to peace, yet Peace Now continues to push for moving Israelis out of the West Bank. Why is this so important?
It's not a secret that we are against settlements. We think that settlements is a post-Zionist idea, that because of the settlements we have occupation in the West Bank, and we would like to see the two-state solution. This is not a secret.
Israel is a post-Zionist idea?
This is, in my opinion, because the Zionist idea is talking about a Jewish democratic state.
Incorrect.
And in the West Bank, you don't have a democratic values. And the settlements are being built in a place where there is no democracy. And we can argue about that, but you know who is going to make the decision?
The Declaration of Independence says that Zionism is the Jews coming back to the land of Israel.
And it's talking about democratic principles.
No, it's talking about Jewish democracy. You are incorrect.
It's talking about equality, that people will be able to vote even if they are not Jewish people. And the Arab people in Judea Samaria cannot vote because they're
not Israelis.
Yeah, and this
not
is why,
because
it's not Israel.
You're
totally right. They are not Israeli because they are not living in Israel.
Not because they're Arabs. They cannot vote because they're not Israeli citizens. The Arabs in Israel can vote. The reason they're not Israeli citizens is because in 1948,
because it's not Israel.
In 1948,
you never annexed it.
In 1948, when Jordan took over Judea and Samaria, not the Palestinians, they have no historical claim. Excuse me. Let me finish. Jordan built the refugee camps, not Israel. Let me finish. Yeah. Therefore, they were never Israeli citizens. Of course they don't. Because when Mexicans come to America illegally, they also don't have to vote.
Arabs never been in Israeli Arabs before they got citizenship.
That's true. And those Arabs who were in Yaffo and Jerusalem became Israeli Arabs.
So I just want to hear the rest of why you guys are pushing for this.
But we don't think that we can evacuate the West Bank and have the two-state solution by going to the Supreme Court. This is not our goal. Our goal when we are going to the Supreme Court is not to make peace between Israelis and Palestinians. This is not the way.
It's just the
way is to go to the public and to win the election. The only reason why we are doing it is that if the settlements and if the government and the settlers are making the decision to build settlements, at least do it on a state land and not on private Palestinian land. At least don't steal new land from people. Now, Afar was established a long time ago, and if we were smart enough then to go to the Supreme Court, maybe we could stop it. But we didn't. So it's effect on the ground. Amona, on the first day Amona came into the place, we were starting the legal process. And this is the difference
10 years later.
This is the difference between
10 years later.
Of the things.
10 years later. Amona started in 95. 95. You appealed in 2005. Don't do that. Don't do
support
that.
the Jewish values.
Yes.
So stand with us.
Okay, so let me explain to you. I want to show you something. I want to show you.
Guys, we're going to have to end the interview now because we've hit our time. Unfortunately, we have to move on to the next story. But thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
It was very interesting to hear both of your views, and obviously we're going to have to see what takes place should this evacuation actually go through.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Israel's former president Moshe Katsav is set to be released early from prison after the parole board unexpectedly granted his latest appeal. The former leader went to jail on December 7, 2011, meaning he's only just completed the fifth of his 7-year sentence. Katsav was serving as Israel's 8th president from 2000 to 2007 when he was forced to step down amid charges of sexual assault. The Iran-born politician was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of rape, obstruction of justice, and other charges. He won't be going home right away, though, because of bureaucracy and an appeal against release expected to be filed by the state. The key sticking point is that the now 71-year-old disgraced leader has reportedly never expressed remorse for his actions. Israelis are coming together across the country to stand in solidarity with the Syrian people as a devastating 6-year war continues to rampage their nation. More than 400,000 people have been murdered in the violent Syrian civil war, many of them innocent civilians and children.
هذا المكان اللي كان مفترض يطلعوا منه الباصات لأجلاء المدنيين من مدينة حلب حاليا عم تم استهداف هون بالرصاص.
A mere 3 weeks ago, the Syrian government launched a military offensive on the previously rebel-held Syrian city of Aleppo, and the bloodshed has been devastating. Since then, protests have been breaking out across the world as people take to the streets to express their outrage at the crisis. On Friday, Israelis held a demonstration in Jerusalem.
We're today showing solidarity with the people of Syria who are now suffering war for over 5 years. Also the people of Iraq and Afghanistan and the other countries that are suffering horrifying wars over the years. And we want to show you that we are your brothers and sisters and we accept you as refugees in our country in Israel.
Even though Syria shares a border with Israel, the Jewish state has failed to absorb Syrian refugees, with the Israeli prime minister claiming the country is too small to take them in. Yet Israeli hospitals and doctors have taken in thousands of Syrians with horrific war wounds. More than 2,000 Syrians in need have been treated for blast and bullet injuries by Jewish surgeons, but most have been sent back into the war zone. Now Israelis are trying to find other ways to help Syrians in need. One Israeli grassroots initiative to help Syrian children is gaining lots of traction and has raised over 250,000 shekels. The Just Beyond the Border campaign plans to use the funds to purchase emergency aid for Syrian refugees, including food, medication, and supplies for the winter. Tonight, a mass demonstration will be held in Tel Aviv, where hundreds of Israelis will come together to stand in solidarity with the Syrian people. The One Voice movement is a global initiative that's on a mission to bring together activists across the Middle East in an effort to fight for a two-state solution. But now the organization's European director, John Linden, is concerned that the election of Donald Trump will make the matter more complicated. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with him to find out more.
Well, first off, it's important to note that this hasn't fully passed through the Knesset, so we'll see what sort of form it takes and whether the Supreme Court ultimately strikes it down. But it's part of a larger dynamic that we do find really troubling, which is this gradual movement towards a one-state reality, which we think is incredibly dangerous for Israelis and for Palestinians. And in that sense, it needs to be resisted. One maybe note of optimism around it is that it does wake many moderate centrist Israelis up to that direction of travel. I think people have been complacent about a two-state solution for a long time, sort of assuming it will somehow arrive at some stage. In that time, people on the radical right have been very busy establishing facts that work against a two-state solution, and the vast majority of Israelis still want separation. They want a Jewish and democratic state. So perhaps this can be something that helps to awaken them to the need to move meaningfully towards that, and that means actions, not just words.
Some Israelis were actually gleeful, including the leader of the Jewish Home Party, Naftali Bennett, a key cabinet minister, a member of the coalition. After the Trump election, he was saying the idea of a two-state solution is dead. We have to move towards a different solution of one state where basically all of Judea and Samaria becomes part of Israel. Is that a scary thought to you?
It is, and it's important that it's a scary thought to most Israelis too. Jewish Home don't have support for this agenda, and I think the more they try and articulate it, potentially the more that, as I said, ordinary Israelis will wake up to it. If we move towards this kind of one-state reality, this gradual annexation of Judea and Samaria, what you lose is Jewish democracy. You lose something that Israelis and Jews have been fighting for a very long time, and that generations have worked hard and made lots of sacrifices for in order to attain. And then on the other side of the equation, you also are depriving Palestinians for their right to self-determination, which is no less just than Jews' right for self-determination. Now, the goal of a two-state solution, whilst it's still viable, allows us to partition the land for both societies, which are really nationalistic, to have their own countries that they feel represent who they are as people, religiously, ethnically, culturally. If we lose that chance, and we force populations that don't want to live with each other to share a country that has a roughly 50% sort of balance between Jews and Arabs, I'm afraid that we could see terrible, terrible consequences that would make the conflict up until now look like just a prelude to the real Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So while there's a chance to avoid that, I think it's really, really important for Israelis and Palestinians to work toward it.
Are you disappointed that Prime Minister Netanyahu did not take a tougher stand to prevent that bill from passing its first readings in the Knesset?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, because I'm not an Israeli voter, my opinion weighs an awful lot less. But as someone who's been paying attention to this for a long time, it is disappointing that Prime Minister Netanyahu hasn't staked out what his agenda is and a pathway to get there with regards to a two-state solution. I think he sometimes winks at both sides and leaves open a level of ambiguity that isn't right for such a long-serving and senior Israeli leader. He's just overtaken David Ben-Gurion as the longest-serving Prime Minister in Israel's history, and that means he needs to really articulate the answer from his perspective to Israel's most pressing question, which is what to do with the territories. And I think there's still time. A leader from the right, first of all, can do things that a leader from the left never could. If any leader is to create a Palestinian state and end the conflict with Israel and its neighbours, I can't think of anybody better suited to it than Prime Minister Netanyahu. It has been disappointing, his lack of progress towards that destination, but maybe 2017 will see opportunities for him to re-engage in some way that we haven't seen.
But what about the Palestinian side? Mahmoud Abbas, many Israelis would argue, has not moved in any direction towards compromise. Is he somebody that Israel can ultimately reach an agreement with about a two-state solution?
Well, I often say to Israelis and to Palestinians that they diminish the importance of internal politics in the other society. So when, let's say, if I criticize Benjamin Netanyahu, an Israeli might give reasons because of his coalition and his base and elections. Those same allowances have to be made of a Palestinian president who has problems around his own legitimacy in his term in office, has people snapping at his heels. He's an 81-year-old man. He's been around for an awful long time. So there are extenuating circumstances that maybe can explain some of the failings that we've seen in Palestine. But in saying that, I agree. I think that there are ways that President Abbas could make greater overtures. On the other hand, compared to an awful lot of the options you have as a Palestinian leader, some of what he's done has been really important and I think morally quite impressive, and it hasn't been recognised often enough in Israel. When he goes on television as a refugee from Sfat and says that he doesn't need to return, when he attends Shimon Peres's funeral against massive criticism in Palestine, and last week in front of the Fatah Executive Committee gets up and defends that position and the position of sending firefighters to Israel. I think in the balance, those kind of things have to be recognised too. I still think he could negotiate a two-state solution with the important regional support and international support that can strengthen his hand. I do worry that after he goes, and he will go eventually, we may get another generation of leaders that it's more difficult to work with, and you may have some of the same Israelis complaining about Abu Mazen right now, yearning for the Abu Mazen days, depending upon who comes out as a successor.
Should the length of a woman's skirt have any influence on how she's perceived in the workplace, or better yet, does the length of a woman's skirt have any impact on how she does her job? These are just some of the questions that the Israeli parliament is being forced to ask itself after a ban on female staff wearing short skirts has spurred major protests. The scandal began around 10 days ago when security guards at the parliament, known as the Knesset, began barring women from entering the building who they accused of being dressed immodestly. Shaked Chasson, an advisor to Zionist union lawmaker Merav Michaeli, was turned away at the door for wearing a mid-thigh length dress and leggings after being examined by 5 guards. It turns out Chasson was just one of many women who had received the same treatment.
We went in and we had people looking up and down our bodies and our legs and just being like, this skirt is not long enough. It's too high above your knee. You're not going to be let in. And having people stare at my legs when all I want to do is go into work just made me feel like objectified. And I don't think that that's what I'm supposed to be dealing with when I'm going to work in the morning in the Parliament of Israel.
Informal dress has long been the fashion in the Knesset, and parliament rules have never specified a skirt length. Until now, that is. A special committee is now taking on the issue where both lawmakers and aides will determine what kind of dress code should be implemented at the parliament. Right now, only open-toed sandals and jeans are banned from the Knesset.
התחלנו לקבל בימים האחרונים עדויות גם ממבקרות בכנסת, גם מיועצות בכנסת, שלא נותנים להם להיכנס ושהן חוות יחס משפיל בכניסה בגלל שהן באות בשמלות כמדי יום במהלך כל העבודה שלנו בכנסת. והחלטנו באופן מודע לבדוק מה קוד הלבוש בכנסת, מסתבר ששינו בלי לעדכן אותנו. באנו לכנסת כמו כל בוקר.
Last week, about 30 women protested in defiance of the ban on shorter skirts, and they were even supported by a member of parliament who stripped down to his undershirt. But some lawmakers say the controversy is out of place in the legislature.
הדברים באמת הידרדרו פה בנושא הזה מעבר לכל פרופורציה. צריך לבוא לכנסת בצורה מכובדת. לא צריך לבוא עם כפכפים או עם גופיות וכדומה. זה אני מקבל. אבל להתחיל למדוד פה שמלות, זה באמת מזכיר לי משטרים שחורים ואפלים. יש כאלה כמה במזרח התיכון, אבל אנחנו עד עכשיו לא היינו שם.
The debate has touched on some of the sensitive religious issues here in Jerusalem, which has become increasingly conservative. The secular majority and the ultra-Orthodox minority are often at odds over the role of women in society and what clothes are appropriate for them to be wearing. But for the women of the Israeli Knesset, which is an institution charged with enacting laws, their own dress code should not be written in stone.
אף אחד פה לא מנסה לעשות פרובוקציה, אנחנו מנסות ללכת לעבוד, ומונעים מאיתנו בגלל שהברכיים שלנו חשופות הבוקר.
There have been a lot of efforts over the years to use technology to detect and diagnose mental health disorders, but imagine if you could use your smartphone to prevent your next nervous breakdown. It turns out you actually can. Israeli scientists have just developed a new device that has made a significant breakthrough in detecting early warning signs of distressful behavior. The new technology was created by an Israeli startup called LifeGraph. Clinical trials show the software can identify looming mental health episodes up to a full month before hospitalization would be required. That means there's time for a medical intervention that could offset the need for institutionalized care many patients find to be devastating disruptions of their lives. After the app is downloaded, it continually tracks people's movements. Wide-ranging data is collected, such as the distance they travel, the pitch of their voices, how many hours they sleep, and more. The program's algorithms then adjust to each user so alerts can be sent to physicians if there's any unusual behavior. Mental health disorders are the third most common cause of hospitalization for Americans between the ages of 18 to 44. The illnesses are expensive for insurance carriers, and the loss in earnings is estimated to top $193 billion per year. But the costs of helping people get the help they need in time, thanks to this one simple Israeli phone app, are immeasurable. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. They say that sanity is calming, but over here we like to think that madness is more interesting. But if you're wondering where your sanity is gone, look no further than today's word shafui, which means sane in Hebrew. Nowadays, between our smartphones and our televisions, we're inundated with massive amounts of information all the time, and it can be hard to stay shafui in the mix. But it's important to try to stay sane, whether that means taking the time to disconnect from your phone, going on a camping trip, or heading to a dance club with your friends. Just remember, sanity is subjective, so no matter how lo shafui or insane someone may seem to you, wait before you make any judgments. Appreciate the crazy in the world. After all, it'll help you stay shafui. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight will be partly cloudy with a chance of light rain over the coast and a low of 46 or 8 degrees Celsius. You can expect tomorrow to be practically the same, but with a higher chance of rain and a daily high of 57 or 14 degrees Celsius. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.87 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.